In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the dark side of MGTOW, MGTOW, and how to prevent it. And for those of you that are new to my work that may have found my channel through simply my tagging of EOW or men going their own way, I look at the big picture I have for years as to why our planet, our economy, our government, our country is in the state that it's in. And that's a part of a darker agenda. And it's important that men understand that, women understand that there is a dark agenda to divide man and woman. And that is how you conquer the human species. So I respect and understand that there are people finding this channel. They're at different levels of awareness. And in no way am I trying to force my beliefs upon you. But I've seen the perspectives that exist out there in the MGTOW movement, MGTOW. And there's a lot of information and perspective that's completely lacking. The dark side of MGTOW is multi-pronged. It leads to resentment of women entirely, which can lead to violent acts against women long-term down the line when men are turned into monsters. And some men will be turned into monsters as a result of their abandonment. There's also a more evolved path that you can take. You can understand that there's a dark agenda to divide man and woman, but it's more than man and woman. There's a dark agenda to turn nation against nation, but most importantly, man against man. And there's been a couple of comments that came in. There was one today that was made in reference to one of my MGTOW videos. And it was something, it was some sort of perspective that this person shared about most Western women being into jihadists or Muslims. And now we're going to address where the dark side of MGTOW goes and why I recommend that you educate yourself a little bit further as to what's really going on, to not be so easily duped into racial hatred or racially charged language. First of all, you need some information about me. My genetics. On my mother's side, I would consider that white, of a Germanic bloodline, Austrian, Nagel, N-A-G-L. In Austria, though, they spelled it a little differently, N-A-G-E-L. With a lot of immigrants, when they come to the United States, I noticed that the actual spelling changes. And so I derive from that bloodline on my mother's side, and on my grandmother's side, on her side, I also have a Welsh bloodline that leads to a king. But now for the father's side. My father was born in 1950 in Kabul, Afghanistan. That's right. You don't meet too many people like me. There aren't too many what you can call truthers or freedom advocates, either on the planet or in America using YouTube. And certainly very few, if any, Ansaris. And that is a royal Islamic bloodline, even though I am not a Muslim. And the reason I'm sharing this information, and I'm going to share more about my life in a future book and in other videos, but it's important for white men that are feeling discarded, that they're losing the women to the Muslims, to the brown men. What a lot of you need to understand is another perspective from another man other than your own, or other than a perspective that is coming from someone that's completely Anglo-Saxon, or one that society would consider completely white. I understand that some of you are living in other states and cities and countries. There are some of you that are in Europe. And I'm hearing this propaganda about the Islamic invasion and Sharia law. And there's gross distortion of reality right now because the world governments of the world are in reality preparing for World War III. And right now it's important for them to see America weakened by pointing the warriors of this society, if you can even call them that, towards the Middle East. And, you know, karma is based on what you put out, comes back, whether or not some of you believe in that. So for them to really conquer this country, they got to keep people being distracted and angry at another group. Weaken the military, weaken the image of the United States by having them in foreign countries and staging terror attacks and funding radical Islam. Most important. There's a lot of people out there that believe wholesale lies about not only that religion, but also people in other parts of the world. But here's the point. As someone that lives in a city that is mostly white, I understand that I'm living a very different, you can even say opposite experience that some of you are living in. I can have empathy for the white man that is feeling that Texas is being invaded by people from another country that he may think are taking his women. Well, let me tell you what it's like for me. What it's like for me to live in Portland is seeing woman after woman after woman after woman with taller white men or taller black men, and not so much with shorter, pale, or shorter olive skin or darker skin men. And so what I see is something opposite of what you're seeing. I'm seeing myself completely discarded, and I'm seeing a world where people from certain countries or bloodlines are completely demonized. And I'm seeing how many women out there are also falling for the disinformation that men from certain countries are terrorists, or that all Muslims are violent. This propaganda that Fox News and CNN and even some of the InfoWars programming is really distorted. And it's leading people into this mentality that if you're a Muslim, that you're commanded by Allah or by Muhammad to commit acts of violence or rape towards non-Muslims. And while you do see some Muslims that subscribe to this, the mass majority of self-described Muslims are not involved in any form of terrorism. And there are many Muslims that believe that their religion is a religion of peace, which is why you have not seen whole-scale terror attacks in this country or against this country since 9/11. In fact, we've actually had staged events that have been fabricated by Western intelligence agencies that have provided the convenient excuse for occupation in foreign lands. Some of you are totally new to this knowledge and information, and some of you are going to wholesale reject what I'm saying and stay in your racially charged box. Now, if you watch the video link down below, which Infowars.com is also linked to, you can see this trailer for a short film. I'm not sure if it's a longer film, but it's called Equality. And I know what they're getting at in the film. I know that it's a jab at feminism to a degree, you know, where this white guy gets into a time machine and he goes to the future from the year 2015, and he stumbles upon a white girl and obviously a man that looks like he's from the Islamic world or Middle Eastern world. He clearly looks Indian, Persian, or Arabic. He clearly is not Hispanic or Asian, and he's being framed in a way as the enemy, as the man that the white woman is preferring. And I understand that some of you live in areas where you're saying that you're the minority. In my experience, in my lifetime, everywhere I've gone, it's mostly been white. And if anyone ever asks me where that tan side of me comes from, when I tell them the truth, they never treat me the same way again. Some will, some do. But for those of you that don't know, I've had a hard time finding work in Portland. And I also am a home-free individual. I technically don't have an income or a home or family. A person of mixed race that I feel that's played a part in me maybe being completely disconnected from both sides of my family. And so one thing I've noticed about not only Persians, Arabs, blacks, Hispanics, whites, whatever the hell that is, Europeans, there's a lot of mean, cruel behavior that is directed at not only the opposite sex, but other racial bloodlines, and those that are mixed. Hence this term mutt in our society. People talk about people like they're dogs or something, you know, trying to understand their breed. And I have seen people treat me a certain way that know nothing about where my father comes from. But there clearly is a biological imperative in some white people, in some. And you need to be mature enough to grow the fuck up and not take personal offense. But there are some white men and women that know, like a dog. I smell a Persian. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell a non-full Anglo-Saxon. And that barbaric, like Thor type, la-ha! Like, it's out there, my white friends. And again, I'm half white. Do not disrespect both sides or either side of me. You will respect the things that I say and not engage in personal attacks, or you will be blocked, because I'm providing valuable information and insight for all of you so you can understand the slave system that's being built for all of us. Because divided we fall, together we stand. They use that for propaganda to get us into a war, but there's truth in that, but that's why they used it. What I have experienced is fear, a primal fear, from most Western European women. And it's not that Austrian side of me. It's not the Nagel side. It's the Ansari side. I have met very few, and there are some people of mixed race in this country, but I have not met that many half Afghanis, half white, or half Austrians, or half Germanic bloodline. And there is a lot of propaganda out there, Nazi propaganda, that you need to keep the bloodlines pure. But it's not just the Nazis. The Ansaris on my father's side, they believe the same thing. So it's not just a white supremacy thing. There's lots of different groups out there in the past believe that you only breed with your own kind or your own bloodline to keep it pure. And that is something that we see from Europeans. It's also something that we see from the traditional Ansaris. What I am is a breakthrough from tradition on both sides of the family, the white side and the Afghani side. I am a break from tradition. Now, what I noticed, and respect to both my parents for bringing me into this world, first of all, I want to say that. And I've had difficulties getting along with both my parents throughout my life, and in recent years, there hasn't been any dialogue between myself or any Islamic relatives. So in no way am I going to bat for any racial group or any side of myself, nor am I seeing one side of myself as more superior than the other. The white and Afghani, and those genetics really go deeper into history. Afghani or Afghan is an artificial construct, like America became an artificial construct in 1776 or 1789. I hope you know where I'm going with this. You know, Afghanistan is only 300 years old, but that land has been there for a long time. Different ethnic groups and nomadic tribes used to call those caves and mountains home. So the idea of race and nationality, these are artificial constructs that have been introduced to human society. And one of the things that my body seems to be coming to terms with is love for both sides of myself. But what I've realized is that a lot of women out there seem really hesitant to be anywhere near my particular bloodline. And I've had to face the facts. There may not be some sort of compatibility on a sexual sense between myself and most Western European women. They seem mostly interested in whites or taller whites here in Portland. Every once in a while I'll see a white girl with a black guy, but not very common here. You might see stuff at the nightclub, things of that nature, but when people are walking down the street, you can almost take a picture, and it really just looks like a tribe of the same genetic bloodlines from Scotland, from Ireland, from certain parts of Western Europe that have been drawn to Portland because of our moist environment. It reminds them of the land their ancestors live in or lived in. And so in a way, and again, don't take offense, have maturity, have the maturity to respect me and the message that I'm sharing with you, because it's insight. What I'm picking up on is this invasion energy, like move to Portland and get away from the darker skinned folks. And get away from LA, get away from New York, get away from Miami. And I understand some of you folks are in those cities and you're on the defense of being white and feeling like all the girls are going with the darker skin and whatnot. And yes, in some ways I've seen dating websites actually try to do that, like targeting white women. Here, date the black guy. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when you see the internet do that, try to make suggestions on what race to be with, and there's other ways that they do this, I think they're trying to fuck with us hardcore. They're definitely trying to fuck with us men. And they want the men to fight over the women, and that's a low-conscious human being, to where men are fighting with other men over who gets to mate with a woman. I mean, how barbaric do you get? How ooga-booga, ooga-booga? I mean, are we here to evolve on the earth beyond the Humpty Dumpty dance? Or are we here to just let ourselves be pawns in a grand chessboard? Man versus the woman, woman versus the man, Afghan versus America, America versus the Afghan, gang rape the Afghan, bomb the Afghans, never protest their enslavement. I've been watching this most of my life, and it's been traumatizing. It's been traumatizing to see people in the so-called freedom movement demonize people from other countries, and seeing people in the alternative media push this propaganda that America is being just wholesale invaded. And even in those cases where you do see a lot of Muslims coming in, and when you do see a lot of Hispanics coming in, and there's an open border, you know your government has a role in that. And it's there to create resentment. So don't blame the people that are trying to escape a bombed out wasteland. Some people should educate themselves about the history of Mexico and Spanish Inquisition, Spanish colonization, that at one time included some of the states in the United States. New Mexico, Colorado. I learned a little bit about the Spanish history when I lived in Colorado, and how feared they were, how violent they were, how cruel they were to the Native Americans, to the Apaches and the Comanches in the San Luis Valley, in the area where I lived in the yurt. That was powerful spiritual medicine man land. But there was bad things that happened then when the Spanish came through. So our whole world's history is loaded with stories about invasion, conquest, rape. And what I'm seeing people today is actually bring up what Arabs were believed to have done thousands of years ago or in the last century. And I see alternative media outlets like InfoWars almost playing a Christian crusade card, and that is not meant to disrespect Christians. I'm seeing like this dark MGTOW, MGTOW movement that's based in racism rise out of the ashes, Order Abkao, in order to create this situation where we're fighting each other instead of those systems of control that are enslaving all of us in the same open-air prison. So, you know, sometimes I wonder, being half from the East and half from the West, if my genetic line, that mix, has anything to do with the fact that I'm able to understand certain things that others have yet to understand. The fact that I'm basically a teacher, a spiritual teacher, to a certain degree. And I think about my 10th century, 11th century ancestor, Khwaja Abdullah Ansari, and I see how he was also ostracized from society, from the Islamic world, as a Sufi Muslim who had a very different interpretation of that which some of us choose to call God. He was exiled in the 11th century in Herat, Afghanistan, and his poetry, some of it, survived. And learning about my true origins, learn about the history of the Ansar name, and also being frightened in a primal way when I see ISIS, which was created by Western governments, take my surname, which is Ansar, A-N-S-A-R. It has its own Wikipedia page, and it goes back to the root of Islam, but in fact, the Ansar or Anshar or other related root names of that go back even further than the 600s. The 600s being the time of Muhammad, the Ansars being the tribe of Medina. They were Muhammad's bodyguards. So that's the bloodline that I come from. And again, I understand that there seems to be a massive immigrant influx. And some believe Islamic invasion in Europe and certain parts of the globe, and many Hispanics, and the border being wide open, and the supposed, illegal immigration problem. When you know that's by design, and when you know that some of these conflict areas or regions where people are spilling out of have already been destabilized by the West, you don't have to be super brilliant. You don't have to be a heliophysicist. You don't have to understand quantum physics to have the common sense to realize that we are being turned against each other. And now we're in a realm that they've divided the man and the woman, and they want the white man to think that, well, all the women are ending up in the hands of the brown man, and it couldn't be anything further from the truth. Yes, you see some examples of Western European women with men that are darker skinned. There's something about sexual attraction between human beings where opposites are attracted to each other. And I'm not a believer in any racial supremacy ideology, be it Afghan, white, black, Hispanic, or Asian, that we must hold our own bloodline, and that's what we really are. I believe that we're spiritual beings inside these physical bodies, and so there are people out there that are talking about the end of whites in a very primal, terrifying, distorted way without any accountability for the destruction taking place in other parts of the country. Other parts of the world, rather, as well as the country, where women and children and their husbands are bombed out of existence, and day in and day out, people are tortured. All throughout the world, this is happening as we speak. You know, places where U.S. troops go, where UN troops go, the lives of women plummet. And stories of gang rapes are out there, and no one doing anything about it, and the Pentagon destroying rape kits, and even women being raped by U.S. troops when they join the military and think that they're going over there to serve the system. Sometimes shit happens when you're living in a world at war, a world full of aggression. So men need to wake up and realize that there is a time to become real men, and there's more to being a man than getting the girl or getting the white girl. And I also notice how a lot of us men are programmed to go after women with a similar genetics. And I think that we need to call into question why we're drawn to want to procreate with what we're wanting to procreate with. I think that men, women, all different racial groups should question their own things that you're afraid of or things that you don't like, and things that you're drawn to, things that you do like. And much of that is based in our biology. And some of you may believe in Darwin's theory, that we came from tadpoles. And some of you may believe that a monotheistic God made man and woman, or made woman out of Adam's rib. And I would suggest learning about the Archons. I would suggest reading the Nag Hammadi and realizing that there is potential that something similar to the Old Testament took place, but instead of it being a loving God that made woman from Adam's rib, I think that we have been in a giant petri dish, a genetic experiment, to create a planet of slaves whose consciousness, especially women in today's society, and we're seeing that, are open to hijack and mind control, to influence them to be with certain types of men. Not so much racially, but men that are dominant, men that are unconscious, and most important, men that are not trying to do anything to change the world for the better. The proof is in the pudding. Most women today seem to be drawn to the bad boy, almost on a biological level. Almost as if the libido or the ability to have an orgasm or to have that release doesn't really seem to be as alive with a decent, genuine man that wants to protect them and see the world rescued from the Draconian system and see us evolve to a higher state of being. Most men and women are trapped into fight or flight or fuck. It's not just fight or flight. It's fight, flight, or fuck. And in a lot of these current American cities, with these different racial groups mixed together in this open-air prison, you can see the sexual tension. You can see and feel the racial tension. You can see and feel the class warfare. So let me wrap up this video. You have a choice. You have free will. There is a light and a dark. There is good and evil. Good means protecting, loving, healing. Bad, killing, destroying, raping, maiming, putting in prison, marginalizing a group as evil. How unconscious can someone be? But that's where we're at. Men that have gone their own way, they're being hit with propaganda right now, and certain conspiracy outlets like Infowars.com are playing the race card. You got Alex Jones with a video saying, whites to be killed in dystopian reality, in dystopian future. That's Mr. Jones's headline. Well, I watched the video, and all he had in that video relating to whites being removed in dystopian future was a 3-minute fictional clip, which will be down below, and the rest of it was just news. So, clearly, Alex Jones is co-opted by the spirit of evil. Alex Jones is a tool of the Archonic agenda. He doesn't have to be a tool of a Western intelligence agency, for that matter, for him to be co-opted. All any man or woman has to be co-opted to is their own ego, or their own illusion, or their own demons, or some other form of mind control or control over their spirit. And Alex Jones fits the bill. I've been studying him for over a decade, and he's shown signs that he's under some sort of hypnosis or influence. He has all the money in the world. He could be doing good things to help us overthrow the system, And instead, he's actually steering things into a racial divide to where it's the whites against the invading browns. And I'm not putting up with it any fucking longer. There is no sense of remorse for all these bombs that have been dropped in the Middle East, countries that did nothing to us on 9/11. And so when you see people that know that 9/11 is an inside job, and they tell that truth out of one side of their mouth, and on the other side of their mouth they're pushing fear of Islam or fear of Muslims, when in reality there are billions of Muslims, and if all Muslims believe that they need to attack non-Muslims, we would be at epidemic levels of danger in this country, because there are many Muslims in this country. So are there really that many bad Muslims that aren't doing what Muhammad said? Well, maybe you should congratulate them if that's the case, because the fact of the matter is, there's quite a few Muslims in this country that haven't even considered doing something harmful or destructive to you, or taking your girlfriend or taking your wife. And any Islamic groups that you do see in this country that are pushing for Sharia law or attempting to do this, you need to find out what groups are funding those groups. You need to find out if there's anything strange about the behavior from those groups, knowing what you know about false flag events, knowing what you know about Western money steering certain groups and revolutions and things of that nature, Arab Spring, the list goes on, the rebels in Syria, ISIS itself. So all of these things, a conscious man should know that the dark side is trying to tear us apart. If they get the men and women divided and then get the men to fight each other over which one's getting the woman who's having her consciousness impacted and penetrated by the archonic agenda that wants to steer her in the direction of being with bad man after bad man after bad man and making sure she is never attracted to goodness. That's the deeper issue. And that's real. So you're not going to get race baiting. You're not going to get a typical 5 cents reality perspective from Alex Ansary. It is my intention to see men going their own way. It is my intention to see men go in a more conscious direction with this movement of declaring our independence from being controlled by women or being hurt by women or emotionally attacked by women. So we have to work together, and we need to be brave enough to speak about anybody in the mainstream media or alternative media despite how much good they've done. We cannot allow ourselves to be cult members. Even if we like 99% of the content that someone puts out, no human being on this planet is 110% pure. And so what I'm calling out are the unconscious flaws in some aspects of humanity, in the aspect of the alternative media that's put out some good information for many years. It is totally unconscious to try to set men against other men. That's only going to make the situation much, much worse. Alright, that's all from me. Thank you for watching. There's going to be more videos on the conscious path of MGTOW, MGTOW, in the future. Subscribe today, share this video if you like it, and we'll talk to you next time.